Okay, it is now 6:30, so I'm going to call the August 10th, 2026 meeting of the Barrington Select Board to order. And we'll start with a roll call of everybody present, starting with Mr. Sakosha.
Sakosha here.
Capiello here.
Nanchak.
Hardikoff here.
And Smako present. We also have our town administrator present, and our municipal office administrator, due to a COVID exposure, is with us remotely this evening. So at this time, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move on to our agenda review and approval. Does anybody on the board or from the town office have anything to add or modify on tonight's agenda?
I'd make a motion to approve the August 10th, 2026 agenda.
Do I have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Sakosha.
Capiello.
Nanchak, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Smako, aye. Okay, perfect. So that is adopted as written, and next we will move on to public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person, and the entire session can only go as long as 15 minutes. You can always submit questions to ask@barrington.nh.gov if you would prefer. This is not an opportunity for a back and forth with the board. We don't know what it is that you are going to share with us this evening, but it is an opportunity. So if anybody online or present in the room would like to give public comment is now open. You can use the raise hand feature if you're online, or if you are present in the room, you can approach the lectern and just give us your name and address.
And there will be a separate public hearing on the topic of a building permit on River Road. So that would be a good time to do public comment for that topic. Yep, yes. Excellent question.
Yes, anything listed as a public hearing or invited guest will have its own separate comment section. Okay, so I don't see anybody raising. Yes, Mr. Town.
Good evening. My name is Matt Town. I live on Candace Pond, or is like rather. The pretensions of greatness. So tonight, I just want to talk a bit about difficult behavior. Most of you, maybe all of you, I know most of you have taken an ethical pledge in your own personal profession. I have particularly 3 times as a nurse, as a legislator, and as a safety professional. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is I would ask, and I don't expect an answer tonight, but I would like somebody to respond to the notion that when you requested the fund the money office, you stated it was to extend the boat ramp. I'd like to have you reconcile that calling down the boat ramp in the face of the Hampshire Environmental Security, saying at least twice that it was not a boat ramp. Those things seem to conflict to each other. So the money is really taken in, my view, fraudulent. Would they have done it? It was just widening the road. I suspect it would not. So if you would get back to me on that, that'd be helpful. It's a clear conflict. And that's unfortunate. I would expect that.
Thank you. Any additional people wishing to share public comments? Again, if you're online, just use the raise hand feature. If you're in the room, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just walk up to the lectern and give us your name. Okay, not seeing any further, we will close our first session of public oh, wait, no.
Christopher Royer.
Yeah, Mr. Royer, we're acknowledging you. Speak.
Yep. Hey, how's it going? This is Chris Royer, 68 River Road in Barrington. What?
Not yet.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we're actually the house between Pete's current house and the one that he's going to be doing this project on.
Mr. Royer, I don't mean to interrupt. The select board will be taking up the issuance of the building permit on River Road next, and there'll be a separate. No, it's okay. There'll be a separate.
Just logged on and thought.
That's okay. That's okay. So there'll be a public comment period there, and we'll make sure that we get to you for public comment under that topic. Thank you.
Right, never mind.
No problem. No problem at all. Okay, so anybody else for general public comment, not related to a public hearing that's being done this evening? Okay, not seeing any further for the general public comment, I will close the initial public comment. There will be a second one near the end of the meeting that is, again, just on general public comment. So with that concluding, we're going to move on to our public hearings and invited guests. And the first one is the public hearing for an issuance of a building permit on River Road, a private road for Peter Phillips and Paula Kozlowski, map 126, lot 20.
Are the applicants here? Yep. So you're welcome to step up here, grab that microphone to the table in case the board has any questions. So the select board has in front of them a cover letter memo from the town planner from the review by staff, the public safety folks and the planning board. This is a category 3 option 2 project. There is pursuant to the policy, there's a requirement of road improvements of about $9,500. They've submitted a proposal to make improvements to the road totaling $19,700. Those details are available in the full project application. And they include reshaping and crowning the road, resurfacing the road, and tree trimming and removal. And you can see the summary of that scope in the cover letter of the application. And the planning board recommended the issuance of a building permit to the select board. So if you folks have anything you'd like to add, you're welcome to, or the select board may have questions.
I will just comment that while we were in the process of putting this application together, some of the planning board rules changed about what your requirements were.
Is that light on the microphone green?
It is now.
Great, thank you.
Great. While we were in the process of completing our application, the planning board did make some recommended changes to the equation that is used for the private road improvement, and there's a different calculation. So when we initially submitted it, we had a bit of a higher number to meet, and under that regard, we did fill in a lot of details around tree trimming, etc. But after we learned that the level of commitment was a little bit smaller, we approached the planning board and we said, these are the options that we feel that we could do for that amount. And we talked about grading and placing down gravel. We talked about grading down the ledge, hammering down the ledge that's creating kind of a hump in the road. And we also talked about perhaps creating more of an emergency turnaround for vehicles at our property line. And at the point during the board, they felt that the best way to go forward would be to address the ledge. And so it was our understanding that that was our main commitment going forward, though of course we do expect to do some maintenance of the road just to repair whatever difficulties happens through construction traffic, et cetera.
Ms. Capiel, were you at that meeting?
I was. So I just first want to say the select board had approved that. Planning board had actually not looked at that prior to that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some of the confusion here.
Yes, I thought you were going to do the ledge, and there were, I don't have my planning board things right here.
And two other things, trimming. And you had said.
Yeah, I think we agreed to take on some of that personally. I think because we would just do it because of emergency vehicle concerns. And
Right,
my
I think the
husband was happy to
turnaround you
keep it.
just said you would.
He would just voluntarily
Right,
do
I
that.
don't think that was actually in the
Would-
notice of decision.
Yeah, and that's not on there. And the scope is important, right? So the part of the purpose of the Class 6 and private road building policy is emergency access to the roads. So it's an opportunity for the select board, with help from the planning board and staff, to identify, incremental improvements to the roads. And so the scope is what matters most for this process. So the scope that was passed on to the select board from the planning board includes reshaping and recrowning, break down the large granite stone causing the hump in front of 46 and 60 River Road, regrade the road to restore ground to ensure that stormwater does not pool on the road surface, dissipates into the surrounding vegetation rather than running off into North River Lake. Number two, resurface the road. A layer of well-graded crushed stone will be applied and compacted to prevent erosion and reduce dust. And then tree trimming and removal. Clear tree branches encroaching over the roadway. Remove trees to widen the road in front of 80 River Road to meet the 16-foot wide standard. So that's the scope that the select board's considering tonight. If you'd like to change that, I think the select board has traditionally asked the planning board to re-review it. Or if that's the scope that you're here talking to the select board about tonight, they may have additional questions, but just to clarify, is that the scope that you're talking about?
I mean, so we're gonna be required to do all of that work, because I mean, that's gonna be well over $20,000, well over that.
I can pull up the whole application, but my understanding is that was what you had
So we
proposed.
presented it forward in the hopes that we would get a recommendation for what they would prefer. And we
Yeah.
did hear that the regrading was road maintenance, and they did not consider that that was a viable way of improving the road. It was not, so that they set that aside. So we talked about the ledge grading, and I thought that that's what they preferred and would agree to. And then additionally, we also just said, we're happy to also do some
Yeah. and
tree trimming, as well
yeah.
as making sure that there's a
Getting
wide
into
around
80 River
turnaround
Road,
for emergency
Getting
vehicles.
into 80 River Road, and also to the left, we're gonna take some trees down, flatten that out. That way, any emergency vehicles can get in to the right, back up to the left, and then
Exit the
back
road.
out.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we voted on though at planning board was the reshaping and the crowning with the ledge. Thought that was important. And then you're going to have to grade it after all of the
Yeah,
construction.
Yeah,
work.
right,
Construction.
understood.
And,
Correct.
and then we have tree trimming also that we voted on. So I think if you're really changing the scope of that, then
No, I don't think we're changing the scope of that.
I think we just
No, that's what
misunderstood
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
was
yeah,
a
we
commitment
just-
for
yeah,
everything.
no,
The motion is-
yeah,
Okay.
As part of the,
So,
yeah,
so your plan to do,
Moving the
get rid of the ledge,
Yep.
regrade everything when you're done.
Yes.
And trim the trees.
yes.
Correct.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's in there. Sorry for any confusion, but like I said, it's important that there's mutual understanding, kind of everywhere. Because what happens from here, if the select board authorizes the issuance of a building permit, then staff have this specific scope. And before they issue a certificate of occupancy,
They
they're
will
making
check
sure that
that.
work's done.
That's right.
And so we like to avoid any confusion down the line and just make sure everybody has a clear understanding now. But it sounds like we're all on the same page. So other questions from the select board, and we'd have to open a public hearing as well.
Any questions from the board? Okay, at this time, I'm going to open public comment on this specific hearing. So that would be anybody here for the hearing on 59 River Road?
80.
Is that,
Maybe you could just sit over there so they can come
Yep,
to the.
perfect.
yeah,
microphone.
yeah, absolutely. So anybody here, you
80
can
River
either,
Road.
80.
River Road.
Step up to the microphone and then we'll get Mr.
oh, yes,
Royer
yes,
as
sorry,
well.
80 River Road. Okay, so yes, please step up, and then if you're online, raise your hand and we'll call you in a particular, order once the comments in the room have ended. Yes.
Good evening, Carol Riley, 59 River Road.
And if you are online, if we could get you to mute yourself until you're called, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Riley.
Sorry. We're here, I want to state that we're not opposed to the building permit at all. There's no issue there. But we do have some concerns about the road improvements, and we really want to make sure that they're not overdone. We have a very narrow road. It's just supports a couple of houses that are there, 7 total that are 6 are, I think, year-round, 1 isn't. And that's all there's ever going to be. And in fairness, the road can't support a whole lot of work. It can't be widened because of the close proximity of some of the structures that are there. And I just did want to clarify that perhaps for number 46 and 50 River Road, that the ledge is a problem. But for number 59 that's been left out, which is our house, the ledge is right in front of that as well. And it's also on our property. There are a number of properties on River Road that actually own the entire road, not just to the center line. I think there's 3 properties on there that do. And I believe that is one section. I don't know the extent of that ledge. They tried to dig it up at one point and they went very deep. I'd like to equate it to a small car. So I don't know realistically how much of it can be taken out. Perhaps if the top could be shaved. But again, I don't know how, even expensive that's going to be.
Well, you get a price to hammer it out with a Bobcat hammer. So, I mean, the whole thing wouldn't come out, but just just to bring it down so you can get.
Again, we'd also like to be included in some of the discussion of when that ledge takes place, because it's definitely going to impact our ability to get in and out of our house. I don't know how quickly that type of road work could be done, but I don't think, it's going to be a couple hours. Let me say that. I also would like to ask that when it's deemed necessary to do the tree cutting or limb cutting, that the neighbors along the road be included in that discussion. And I say that because we all own the property up into, and some including the road. And I don't think it's fair that we're excluded from that discussion when the trees are mostly on our property. And in fairness to Pete and Paula as well, I think that it would be nice and neighborly to let everybody in on what's going to happen. I don't think people will be particularly opposed, but there are some concerns. I also realize that this is a unique situation because generally with Class 6 road permits, you're dealing with frontage on a lot that a house is going to be built on. This is just an entry point into a lot to construct a new home. So there isn't any real frontage per se to deal with. And I think that that brings up a little bit different set of problems in how you require an individual to do work that is in essence on other people's property without either including them and putting the onus on them to deal with that. And we would like that to be considered as well as you move forward. We provided a letter tonight to the board, and I obviously didn't expect you to read it tonight, but we'd like to enter that into the record if we could, just so it's there and we stated our concerns. I do apologize for not being able to bring this up earlier at Planning Board or Zoning, but I was not available to do that. So we would have certainly alerted everybody beforehand. But lastly, emergency access. I'm not sure how practical or feasible it is to include emergency access on Pete and Paula's lot where the new house will be, because it is a little bit restrictive as far as width is concerned. Historically, emergency vehicles have parked and turned around in our driveway. We have a very long driveway and it is wide in places, and we have no problem with that. But I did want to know if that is something that will continue to be supported by the departments. Is that appropriate? I don't have the answers to that, but we're willing to allow them to use it when needed, because it is a very restrictive end down there when we get to the last three houses kind of there. So that's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Can I respond to one of them? At Planning Board, I do remember asking whether it was an HOA, because we always ask people to work with the HOA to make sure that the plan is agreeable to everybody, but you didn't have an HOA, so we didn't know what to do with that on Planning Board, so we let that go.
Could I answer to that today?
Yeah, because we heard there was not.
Just in support of
those groups.
Pete and Paula. We don't have an HOA. Historically, those were camps, and there was only ever for about 30 years, maybe 3 to 4 houses that were occupied to any degree, and then they became year-round. The rest remained as seasonal, but now they've pretty much all converted to year-round, with the exception, I think, one. We've never had a homeowners association. We've tried in the past to get a road association together, and it has been adamantly refused by everybody on the road. So it is difficult though when, people don't want to cooperate. So it would have been nice, but I do understand. I think people were afraid of getting levied assessments for the road, and I can appreciate that. So.
Sure.
Could I ask a clarification question of the town administrator? At this stage of approval, can conditions continue to be addressed in this approval process? It's my understanding. Okay.
Two things I'd like to say while your wheels spin on that. So working backwards from the road association or HOA. So up until I think 3 years ago, the state kind of made this weird landscape for Class 6 and private roads relative to road maintenance. And the only real way to actually effectuate some sort of, levying fees or whatever was to form a separate organization, a road association, have it registered. And then even then, it was questionable whether liens that were placed on property for not paying, road fees would actually hold up in court. But usually those came to bear when somebody tried to sell the property and they just settled it and moved on. That said, and I've got the statute here, it's RSA 231:81-A. That was about 3 years ago. Don't quote me on that, but it's recent. And that makes clear that everybody that lives on a privately maintained road has a responsibility to contribute. So it doesn't spell it all out perfectly, but there's a statutory provision for not having a properly formed road association, but still being responsible for contributing to the regular road maintenance. Separate than that, and I think the more important topic from the comment the select board heard first tonight is, and I'm reading from the policy, so relative to road improvement requirements, and this is private property, like what if it isn't your property? So it says the applicant must also provide documentation of its rights to perform the work on the road. Acceptable documentation includes, but is not limited to, permission letter from the road association, if any, permission letter from property owner of the road right away, or a copy of the applicant's property deed documenting the rights to maintain and improve the road. So there are, private roads come in a variety of different fits and finishes, right? Sometimes one property owner owns the road and others have access rights over that. Sometimes those deeded access rights include the right to improve that access for access to their property. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's private property, and we've run into situations where that right of way is sometimes so narrow on some of these older camp roads that the work that is really impactful to improving the road, like I think I heard tree trimming or ledge removal, isn't even within the extent of the easement or right of way, but it impacts the ability to travel on the road. So to be clear, nothing the select board or town can do impacts the ability or the rights that somebody else has to somebody else's property. We don't regulate that. We require that that be provided. And so based on what we're hearing tonight, it sounds like maybe that doesn't exist, because if there's trees on somebody else's property that are part of this scope that you all don't have specific written permission to remove yet, then that might be problematic to the scope. Maybe you can address that. But nothing the select board can do here gives a building permit applicant the right to use somebody else's property without their permission. It's what your deed says, it's what the easement says, or a separate agreement that you all might have. So I suspect the select board might want to hear more about that, but maybe you want to take the rest of public comment first?
Yes, I would like to do that. I do see a hand raised online. Is it Sharon McKinney?
Let's get Mr. Royer first.
Oh, I don't see his hand
Well,
raised.
his hand went
Yes.
down, but he's...
Mr. Royer, if you would still like to make a comment, you're welcome to at this time.
Yeah, I was just gonna, speak on Pete and Paul's behalf. We're in the house that's just adjacent to where they're going to be doing the building, and the other side is the house that they live in now. And I have no problems with what they're proposing, and Pete is nice enough he's been plowing the road and maintaining the road and things. So I think it's everything they're proposing with getting the ledge out and everything else, better access is going to be good for everyone on the road. I understand Ms. Riley's point about wanting to be notified when that will take place, so that, if we need to, we can park our cars down the end of the road or do what we have to be able to get in and out. But I think that, whatever small inconvenience there might be, the benefit is going to be much better for everyone down the road. So, we're being the closest neighbor, we're in full agreement with what they're proposing, what they want to do. So, that's kind of all I wanted to say, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McKinney?
Yes, hi, everybody. I wanted to basically ditto what Chris said. We're very excited about all the recommendations for the road and to make that a little bit better. I think it's going to be safer. We've been here since 2018 and haven't been part of any conversation about a road association. So I think what what Ms. Riley was talking about predated a lot of us that are now here full time. We all communicate as often as we can on improvements. We share costs in terms of any grading, plowing. You know, we're pretty good about that. So I don't have any doubt that Pete and Paula will keep us absolutely informed what's happening, so there won't be any safety issues. I'm total in support of what is happening, and I hope this can move forward. So if there's any questions or anything else that I can share, I'm happy to, but I think many of us on River Road are very supportive of what they're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else for public comment, either online with the raise hand feature or in the room? Okay, I'm going to close public comment on this, but I think the board may have follow-up questions and discussion.
Are you able to give a time frame for when you're going to do the work, Pete and Paula?
Please just come up to the microphone so it can be part of the record and the folks online can hear. Thank you.
Yeah, nothing has been scheduled, but we can certainly communicate about it when it has been scheduled and when we have a better understanding of what the impact will be, because that will be dependent on the professionals doing the work. And I would also like to comment, I think most of the trees that we had in question are really at the entrance of our property, and we did mark off quite a few trees there, and we're not committed to all of those trees. It's really mostly the dead standing trees that will just widen immediately into our driveway. So if that was a concern, that it was all the red trees, it's going to be. And certainly we will not trim anything without talking to anybody who it belongs to.
We won't do anything on anybody's property.
And we have seen circumstances where there's an approved scope, and then after the authorization to issue a building permit has been made, there has been a disagreement out in the field about property rights, and if the scope isn't done, then a certificate of occupancy isn't issued. They may have to come back, but it's not like this is the end. The select board says this. I mean, the work has to get done. It has to get done in cooperation with whoever else has rights to whatever the property is.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the issuance of a building permit for map 126, lot 20 on River Road as presented.
Would second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Koshak.
Gabriella, aye.
Nantrick, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samako, aye. Okay.
Thank you.
Be in touch.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Consider a private Facebook group for the 7 homes there, or send postcards out with just so people know when to pull their cars off their property when you're working there. Something to consider just to keep the peace.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they wanted to remove or separate out for addressing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Koshak.
Gabriella, aye.
Nantrick, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samako, aye.
Carries.
We will move on to appointments. We have one on for discussion.
Yes, there is a interested zoning board of adjustment member. Mr. Lagasse has attended a meeting, has spoken with the chair, and is interested in joining. You have a copy of his application for appointment in your materials, and this would be up for decision at our meeting in September.
No discussion here.
Yeah, looks fine.
I mean, it looks like he has, zoning board can always use a broad variety of skill sets. He's a home inspector, so that's always helpful.
Always grateful for volunteers that step up.
Yes.
And you say he has attended a meeting
Yes.
Yes.
and discussed this with the chair?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
I don't see any further requests for discussion, so we will have him on for the September 14th, 2026 meeting. There may be some procedural things that have to be included in that vote, but, all right. Anything you wanted to add on that?
Not tonight.
Okay, then we'll move on to the staff report.
Awesome. I will start with August work anniversaries. Richard Conway, former police chief in the town of Barrington, started work in Barrington 39 years ago. and continues to show up for the town now in the Parks and Recreation Department as a site supervisor, and convincing every kid in Barrington that there's a purple elephant that lives on top of the Early Childhood Learning Center. That will be once people forget that he was the police chief, it's the next generation that will remember that
The purple elephant.
the purple elephant on top of the Early Childhood Learning Center. So Michael Bayer was hired as an EMT 16 years ago. Keith Brody in the fire department 15 years ago. Michelle Libby, police sergeant, started in Barrington 10 years ago. Shane Elliott started in the highway department crew 9 years ago. This month I was hired 8 years ago. Mark Morrow, who's currently the Public Works project manager and mechanic, was hired 7 years ago this month. Rebecca Smith started in the town clerk's office as a town clerk assistant, but is now the deputy town clerk 4 years ago this month. Chad Lee, Parks and Recreation Department program coordinator, very popular guy this time of year with youth sports, starting up for the fall, was hired 4 years ago this month. Diane Carter was a custodian who, when she retired from the school as a custodian, long career, she joined the town part-time. We hired her 4 years ago. Logan Pillar started in the fire department 2 years ago. Carl Shonio, who was recently promoted full-time in the fire department, started 1 year ago. And our very own public works director, hard to believe it's been a year, was hired 1 year ago this month, Michael Netto. A lot of work in this past year. Moving on, 2027 budget development. So the process is underway. Department heads have their initial budget proposal documentation that they will be submitting back to myself and the finance administrator by September 4th. So that process, that schedule is similar to prior years. After that happens, myself and the finance administrator go through and compile the entire budget. Usually that's where we do the most jockeying with staff and competing requests for separating the needs and wants in Barrington for the 2027 budget. And we will compile all of that into our initial budget proposal and make the binders available. Our target is September 29th. And we intend, as we have in the past, to make the electronic budget binder available at the same time. So everybody in Barrington has access to all the same information at the same time, not just the budget committee, not just the select board, but everybody. And so the advisory budget committee will take that process on from that point. There will be an initial budget presentation on October 14th to the advisory budget committee, and the October 26th select board meeting, that, remember, is the meeting that we moved from the 19th. So the initial budget presentation to the select board will take place on October 26th. And department heads will be meeting with the advisory budget committee over their first couple of meetings. Then the capital improvement program committee will be making a presentation. And then the advisory budget committee will be spending the entire month of November in budget deliberations. So you have a link to a copy of the budget calendar. I printed it in a prior packet, and they had an organizing meeting on June 10th. I provided a link to those minutes in case you're interested as well. Happy to field any questions on 2027 budget development process.
No. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I just thought you might want to add that the Capital Improvement Committee is adding one more layer to the scope of review of various things being presented with the budget this year.
Yep.
Lots of work going on there.
There's a lot of work, and it's really exciting. And so integrating, in the past, we have had department heads just make, as part of their annual budget request, funding requests that would require a warrant article, typically capital reserve requests. This year, that's going through the Capital Improvement Program Committee first, and the recommendation will come from that committee, not only on what the long-term capital plans are, but for that most immediate 2027 funding requirements, whether it's setting money aside or funding a specific project. They'll be making those recommendations to the Budget Committee at their last meeting in October. But the Capital Improvement Program Committee has a brain trust of people. They're also working on a methodology for trying to determine how we fund some of our bigger capital needs. So when do we set aside in the capital reserve? When do we consider bonding some of these bigger projects? And how do we approach that and balance that in a productive way for the community? So a lot of good work happening there.
That is a lot of paper, the budget binders. So I would just make a request that for me, and I No, Tiffany's listening. I would just prefer a digital copy. You don't have to make a physical copy for me. And if there's anybody else on the board who can manage a digital copy, I would recommend that you consider it just because it's so much paper.
Go to flash drives.
Yeah, it's all available on the website. So, and it's a linkable table of contents. So, truth be told, when I need to find something that's in the budget binder, I go to the website because it's there. It's nice to have the budget binder, but yeah, certainly just let us know by the beginning of September if that's the case, but we will reduce by one.
Some of us Luddites still like to.
And that's perfectly fine. We're just glad you're here.
Yeah. I go back to the George Bailey days when the budget binder wasn't enough. We included magnifying glasses that year. I think you were on the budget committee then, but to make sure that we could read all the fine print. Okay. Moving on, exemption and credit changes for 2027 warrant. So I always this time of year try to put the bug in your ear. The town meeting is the method for making any changes to the exemptions and credits offered to residents in the community. Starting back 2018, we began a process of analyzing what our exemption and credit offerings were, what the participation levels were, and how that compared to the county and the state to help make data-driven decisions as far as our exemption and credit levels and offerings to the community. So we will still do that. That data is available in time for our October meeting. And so I expect that on our October 26th meeting, that's when we'll have that exemption and credit analysis. But that's also when we should really be making any of the decisions about what warrant articles we might want to propose. So I'll bring it up at the meeting in September and the first meeting in October as well. But if there's anything that you'd like to see, any analysis or research done, let us know in preparation for trying to make any decisions on what warrant articles the select board may consider sponsoring for that October 26th meeting.
Okay, I personally think it might be helpful to, since we're in a revaluation year, to see sort of a comparison so that we can look at ratios of the current value versus what the available exemptions and credits are, just so that I think that would be helpful in looking at that to see if we need to make any proportional adjustments that stem from that revaluation.
Absolutely. So I'll make sure that when we have some of that preliminary data from our assessing consultant, that we have that conversation at the same time. Obviously, because the exemption, because of how exemptions work, an exemption exempts a portion of the property, and that's a fixed dollar amount. And so when you have a revaluation and the value of property goes up, that fixed dollar amount stays the same. So it essentially becomes less valuable in a revaluation year or following a revaluation. In the past, the select boards looked at that data and seen that we were still more generous than even the county average and much more generous than the state average. But we can make sure to look at that data specifically.
Anybody else?
Good point.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. I have a copy in your packet and linked online the second quarter financial analysis. No significant surprises. The town has expended 43% of the budget, and we're 50% through the budget year. On page 2, you see broken out by department where we track with notes. As far as revenue and offsetting revenue, as you know, is very important. About 50% of what it takes to run our local government comes from non-property tax revenue. So we track these revenue categories very closely. You'll see that we're 50% through the year. We've only collected 43% of our anticipated revenue. That may look concerning until you understand that 25% of our entire non-property tax revenue is from the state. Rooms and meals tax distribution and highway block grant. And that rooms and meals tax distribution comes in like December 31st. So that's an outstanding item. So we're ahead of schedule for the locally collected revenue that we're responsible for. And then on the last page, you see the bigger categories. It's 86% of our locally collected revenue are represented in that bar chart. And we're right on track for all of them. Any questions about the financial analysis?
Available online for everyone to review?
It is.
Thank you, sir.
Of course. 2025 financial audit. Staying on the finance topic. So the 2025 financial audit is available on the town's website, barrington.nh.gov/2025 audit. You all have a bound copy from our auditors. Additionally, at that web address and a copy printed in your packet is a letter from the finance administrator addressing the one finding, the singular finding in the audit, which was, and this is kind of a follow-up finding from last year, the library trustees in managing their funds had previously not used any accounting software, and that creates challenges for access to information. Fortunately, the library staff and library trustees were quick to implement QuickBooks to address that audit finding 2 years ago. And this year, they wanted that expanded for all of the accounts. And again, the library staff and library trustees were quick to support expanding that. So that was resolved even before the audit was finalized. Special recognition of the finance administrator. She is tremendous at her job, and not many staff get an outside expert team to come in and evaluate just how good you are at your job every year. The finance administrator gets that. And we've changed auditors, and every time the conclusion is the same. She does a phenomenal job. She's closely supported by the work of staff across the town to make sure that we're doing our best in terms of our accounting and best practices.
You might want to remind people that we changed auditors because that's considered to be best practice. It wasn't because of any failing of previous auditors.
Exactly, and it's really helpful because the different auditing firms have a different approach and have different recommendations, and so we sharpen our pencil by getting fresh sets of eyes every few years to make sure that we're doing best by our residents. Moving on, the state economic revitalization zone renewal. So this is a no cost to Barrington, no impact to Barrington, property taxes or anything else, opportunity that the state makes available to promote economic development. So community has the ability to establish economic revitalization zones, and if jobs are created in those zones, the businesses that create those jobs or have that growth have state tax benefits. And so it's more complicated than that, but that's the nuts and the bolts. And so back in 2015, Barrington established 7 economic revitalization zones, basically covering all of the commercially available property in Barrington. And so those renew on a regular cycle. They were just renewed by the town planner. And it seems like TurboCam may be eligible to take advantage of some of those tax benefits, again, from the state. TurboCam has always and will continue to pay all of their property tax burden. Class 6 and private road policy. So this is, we talked about this briefly, but the select board asked the planning board to review the Class 6 and private road policy, make comment, and we hoped that they would have those comments for tonight's meeting. Now we expect those in September because of the planning board schedule. Questions about that? Great. Ayers Lake Boat Launch Improvement Project updates, and I have an opportunity to address the public comment as well. So update from where we left off last, the Public Works Department completed the grant-funded Ayers Lake Boat Launch Improvement Project last year. Following the completion of the project, there were a few actions taken. One, appeal of the permit issuance, which has since been withdrawn, and 2 complaints about the work that was done. And so those are available electronically on the town's website, linked to the town administrator report. DES came out. We met with the folks from DES to review what the complaints were. The field inspection report is also available. You have a copy of that in your packet and linked online. And last month, the town received a letter of deficiency identifying a 100 square foot area where the stone that the town used in widening the road was too far down the slope. And so they asked us to hand rake that up with appropriate erosion control. And that work was done on August 1st and submitted to the state for review. We haven't heard back, but we've submitted that to the state. So about that same time, the state's exotic species program coordinator, who's actually a Barrington resident and has been helpful to the invasive species working group, Georgia Bonnell, reached out to the town, and she did a survey of milfoil on Ayers Lake and found a patch at that north end of the lake by the boat launch. And so she was there on the 27th. On the 28th, she had local divers come in and remove that patch. Her words were, as a quick fix, and they were able to address that on the 28th. I included a copy in your printed packet.
What, this is not a public comment right now, so if you could just let us.
Yeah, well.
So I included a copy in your packet of some of the state's guidance. I think we're fortunate to have the support of town meeting in forming the invasive species working group, which has been working on organizing and researching and is certainly working towards recommendations to the select board on how the town as a whole can take a collective approach to help support the health of the various water bodies in Barrington. The state has a tremendous amount of resources and guidance available to lake associations and communities and just interested property owners. I included a copy of their milfoil fact sheet, this is their 2026 update in the printed packet. We've got that circulating and available on the town's website as well. I think the recent occurrence of milfoil on Ayers Lake is very indicative of what the state's approach is. Education, early detection, and rapid response. And the early detection piece is a really important one. And having trained weed watchers, a program that the Ayers Lake Association and others on Ayers Lake and other water bodies in Barrington have been very active in, is an essential part of that early detection piece. And then rapid response, obviously it helps that she lives in Barrington, but having support from the state in their approach was very helpful for that also. I'll also point out that the police chief issued a waiver of the parking ordinance for August 15th, as he has the authority to do. It was a request made by the Granite State Kayak Anglers Group and the New Hampshire Fish and Game sanctioned fishing tournament that they're having on August 15th. They expect up to 15 kayak anglers to participate in that event. Any questions? Oh, and so to the public comment. So there was a question about ethics, and the town applied for a grant for the improvement project that was made down at Ayers Lake. And there was a question about, calling the boat ramp a boat ramp. And so be perfectly clear, the select board knows this. We've talked about this publicly before. But before the town applied for that $100,000 grant program for boat launch improvements, we contacted the granting agency, explained the circumstances of the Ayers Lake boat launch. We contacted the State Department of Environmental Services and explained, hey, these are the circumstances. We have an opportunity to make improvements here. Their response from DES is, any work that requires a permit, submit a permit application. And the response from the granting agency is, this is what this project is for. This is what this grant project is for. And so the terms of the grant agreement, which are available on the town's website, and I can certainly get anybody a copy of it, but the terms of the boat launch improvement project were just to improve the boat access on Ayers Lake. So the specifics of what those improvements weren't detailed. And we were clear with the granting agency that we didn't know exactly what we would do. We needed engineering done. We needed surveying done. We needed research into what was possible in that area to address the most either environmental or safety impacts we could of this existing access point and make it as best we could. And so that grant agreement that grant program has been closed out. The town has received its reimbursement. The grant agency is satisfied with the work done and the materials submitted in response to that. And then in terms of, DES, and actually there's a copy in your packet. DES calls it a boat ramp. If you look at the field inspection report issued by the compliance specialist, the crushed stone, notes and observation, crushed stone has been placed along the right-of-way and boat launch. Materials do not extend below the surface of the lake. And this is where there was the initial inspection report, the compliance specialist thought everything was fine. Once the lake was filled, they realized that the stone, that 100 square feet of stone was too far. But anyways, my understanding in conversations with the folks from the state is any improvements that we make beyond the work that's already been done requires additional permitting. And they've made clear what requirements exist in order to secure that permitting. But the access point, the access as it exists right now is perfectly legal. They have no objections to the access point. The two complaints that were issued relative to the work that was done there, the state reviewed all of those, the content of both of those complaints. And their singular concern was the 100 square feet of stone. Which has been rectified, and they're reviewing to make sure it's rectified to their satisfaction, as they should. But the state does not object. The State Department of Environmental Services does not object to that access point on Ayers Lake. Period. That's what their attorney has said. That's what their compliance administrator said, and otherwise. And so the vernacular, like I said, the DES themselves are calling it a boat launch, and so I don't. The improvements as part of the grant were consistent with the grant agreement. And like I said, DES calls it boat ramp. So I think nothing about that is fraudulent, as was accused.
Quick question. There was never a question whether it was fraudulent, but appreciate that everyone has perspective. In reference to the variable milfoil, such a small amount was removed. Is it possible for the Lake Association to approach the state and ask if they could cover that one diver, so that should they ever have an experience in the future, that it would cover removal, much like what we saw at the 80 lakes throughout the state of New Hampshire? Would that be something that the Lakes Association could consider it to better protect themselves?
It's entirely possible. I don't know exactly how that program works. What I do know is that it depends on funding and need year over year. So they have a method in order to distribute that. But that seems like a reasonable request to make. I can certainly coordinate with the Lake Association.
I think it would be wise to just consider it.
Okay.
Joyce.
I think the finding of milfoil is certainly a disturbing condition at Ayers Lake. And we brainstorm ideas when we were first looking about this at washing stations, and that wasn't appropriate. We may want to revisit those conversations, but does that need to start first with the invasive species group and then come to us, or how might we?
I participated in the kickoff meeting with the invasive species working group, and I kind of laid out some of the background of conversations that had happened over the years, to include contributing to a potential capital reserve fund. And we talked about the idea of a washing station. Remember where we left off? The problem with a washing station at a boat launch is you have to have a place for what's washed to go. And so it's not, what the state kind of recommends is that boats arrive clean, arrive where they're going clean. And it's actually against the law. It's against the law to travel with any vegetation on any watercraft. It doesn't have to be an invasive vegetation. It can be a lily pad, but that's against the law. So we talked about, exploring a potential to have either a high enough pressure or high enough temperature centralized washing station, maybe up on Ramsdale or something like that.
A resident suggested that to me recently, somebody who doesn't live on any of the lakes in town.
Yeah.
But
and so, I certainly
about that idea.
Yeah, I certainly expect that the invasive species working group is considering kind of all of the multifaceted approaches that can be taken to, early action, or education, early detection, rapid response approach, which sometimes requires money, sometimes requires action, sometimes requires education.
So we'll be meeting with the invasive species group, August 20th?
That's a separate thing. That's regarding the septic ordinance. It's kind of a multi-group meeting.
So that's a public information meeting for the proposed septic ordinance, which we've asked the invasive species working group, because they represent the 7, major water bodies in Barrington, to participate and weigh in. I think the select board is still undecided on how to proceed with a proposed septic ordinance. So having feedback from the folks most affected seems to make sense. Certainly there are environmental benefits, but a separate topic. No, so there's, the select board did not make a specific request for having a report back from the invasive species working group. And so, certainly that's something, if you want to put a date on a calendar, hey, we'd like to see a preliminary report by
a specific report
Yeah.
from that group.
I think we wanted to
And-
let them get their feet underneath them as a new group, but yeah, I think that would be.
And
I
because
agree.
this is a new finding, I mean, we should be continuing to brainstorm
Absolutely.
ideas here
Absolutely.
to keep the quality of this lake
Yeah, absolutely.
ideal.
Jim?
Just for clarity, just want to make sure we didn't use COVID funds for the project.
So we didn't use our American Rescue Plan Act disbursement. The town received about $1 million. So separately, the state received their own CARES and American Rescue Plan Act funds, and they did a variety of things with those funds. One of the things that the state did is they set up the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery, and that kind of temporary department dispersed COVID funds, ARPA and CARES funds, to a variety of grant programs, some existing, some new. So like the community center renovation, the $1 million grant we received towards that renovation project was part of the state's ARPA funds. This $100,000 grant program for boat launch improvements, that grant program didn't exist before. That's a new grant program they created based on a perceived need, and that was a portion of the state's ARPA funds as well. So trickle down through the state, some of the same requirements exist, but we report to the state, not to the federal government. For our ARPA funds, we reported directly to the federal government.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I had one last question, and this is a little bit tangential. I was looking at the Granite State Kayak Anglers Group where the waiver of the parking ordinance has been done. Is there any requirement for them to, certify when they're coming in to use it that they have adequately cleaned their boats?
It's a good question. It's part of their bylaws.
Excellent.
Yep. So they make as part of their bylaws that every boat, anytime they go anywhere, their boats arrive clean, consistent with state law.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions?
So we'll come up with a date sometime to meet with invasive species group. And
Yeah, they
see
have
if they
our-
brainstorm.
And I can check in, I can check in, or you can check in to see, maybe get some feedback on what a reasonable request
Yeah,
would be.
I'm the liaison, so I'll reach out.
Right.
Okay.
Because we need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Granite Chapter Old Truck Meet 2026. Jim, I don't know if you want to give a primer. I've got the dates on here, but Jim's been working with the leadership there.
Leadership has been great. As you guys know, they're always there to help us out and make improvements on there. Such a great working relationship. And if you get a minute, swing by, go check it out. They had the guys down there in the heat and everything, getting it done, getting it ready for the upcoming, it's up here in a couple weeks, but coming up. So very thankful that we have that relationship with the Granite State Truck Chapter folks.
So back in Barrington for the second year in a row. Obviously, it started here. The dates for that are August 22nd, 23rd. It'll be on Barrington Common. And so, yeah, they did a ton of work at the back of the property there, cleaning up trees, doing, tree trimming and some site work back there. And as Jim said, it's a great relationship we have with them. They care a lot about this community. They were so excited to come back. And they've been making some really great improvements to that property that we're all able to enjoy. So I provided a link to the event page in there. And again, back on March 16th is when the select board reaffirmed the authorization for that group to use the property on August 22nd, 23rd. Moving on, National Night Out. So Barrington, first ever year participating in the national event, National Night Out, which is aimed at bringing law enforcement out into the community and building those important community relationships. And I know you all were there. It was phenomenal. And I think, it will definitely be back, but I think it's important to point out Rick Campbell, Deputy Police Chief, when I participated in the final interview round before he was hired in Barrington, he talked about how important community was to him and how he would never leave the job he had in Somersworth except to come work in Barrington, which is his hometown, where he's born and raised, where he lives now. And so, when he talked about community, he talked about the community efforts that he was a part of in Somersworth that he wanted to see come to Barrington. And National Night Out was one of those. And so from the moment he was hired, he had started laying the groundwork to be able to bring a community event like that isn't easy. I mean, Dart Helicopter came in. We had all sorts of, departments and community organizations and businesses there. And so certainly, and he'll be the first to tell you, it was a team of folks that helped. Top of that list is the Parks and Recreation department, the fire department, the Public Works department, obviously the rest of the police department, but the bus company was there and other support organizations, DARE and Haven, and the BYA was there giving out snow cones, and obviously the band. So it was a phenomenal event, and it's things like that that make the difference between a town and a community. And we have a community, and it's having people like Rick Campbell that are willing to put in the time and effort above and beyond his day job as deputy police chief to be able to have events like that makes Barrington what it is. So August 3rd, 2027, mark your calendars. We'll be back, and I think it was great to have the select board with an information table there. Hopefully that'll be something that will continue also. Moving on, the New Hampshire primary election is on September 8th. So two topics. The one that's in my town administrator report is we have found, and the select board has in their strategic plan, identified that resident outreach is a very important part of what you all do as a select board. And what better opportunity to do that than at an election where the very voters that are helping make the most important decision in Barrington are showing up to vote. And so we're prevented from being able to do that at local elections because there are local issues on the ballot. But for the general election, the primary and the general election in November, the select board has had great success having information tables there. So the select board's already agreed to have an information table there, so that part is settled. I'll work with the chair to make sure that we set up a schedule so that we have a rotation based on folks' availability. But I think also what has worked really well in the past is any topics that we can have specific visuals or information available to talk to residents about. In the past when there's been concerns about development, we've had details about who gets to decide what is developed on a piece of land and how does that process work and how can you get involved. And back when we had the town center proposal going before or had just been approved by voters, we had information, what to expect, how to get involved, how to follow along. So if you have ideas, things that folks are talking to you about that you want to have information available for the September 8th election, let me know. We can get some boards made up. Otherwise, we'll just have the information there and be a friendly face to field whatever questions or concerns folks might have.
Awesome.
I think absentee ballots are now available.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep, the ballots have been set and they're available. Stop by the town clerk's office. So the second topic, we have a new moderator, right? So Keith Pratt was elected moderator by voters earlier this year, and this is his first election. And so he reached out and asked that we talk publicly about the opportunity for volunteers. So certainly Ron did a great job of, promoting and enlisting the help of a ton of election workers. And so Keith has reached out to all of those folks. But the deeper the well is, the easier it is to have shorter shifts and better opportunity to get people involved in the process. So if anybody's listening at home, anybody in the room, I see a lot of election workers in the room already, but if there's anybody that wants to participate, Keith Pratt, you can stop by the town clerk's office to get a copy of his contact information. But if the select board knows anybody, it's a great way to get involved in the election process. And there's some training you have to participate in, and the day of. It is a paid position. Because that's the easiest way to handle that. Some folks donate the money if you just want to do it for volunteering, but it's it's a great way and pretty minimal commitment, I guess I'll say. So that's the plug for election workers. And then the state general elections on Tuesday, November 3rd. So mark your calendars. So we talked earlier about this, the septic ordinance public information meeting. So the select board heard a presentation from the septic ordinance working group that had prepared a draft septic ordinance. And the nuts and the bolts of what the septic ordinance said was, if enacted, anybody who owned property within a certain distance of a water body would be required to pump their septic system every 3 years and have it inspected regularly as well. And so these septic ordinances exist in other communities. The main purpose is to prevent the loading of our lakes that contribute to the cyanobacteria blooms. So those nutrients that leach out of failing or failed septic systems can really wreak havoc on the health of a lake. And so the select board heard this proposal, heard some immediate feedback from residents, and the decision of the select board was, we want to have a all hands public information meeting to get more feedback on what folks really think about this, because it's not necessarily something that the select board at the time wanted to just jump in and go through the process to enact this ordinance. The select board tossed around maybe having a advisory only warrant article in 2027 to get a feel for the voting populace in Barrington. But before of all that, there's going to be a public information meeting. That is going to be, and the discussion with the select board happened on June 8th, but that public information meeting is going to be August 20th. It's going to be in this room. It's going to be available virtually. It's going to be recorded. Certainly if any select board members are available, it'd be great for you to attend here firsthand, but obviously it'll be recorded and we'll have a review of that as well. And then we'll take up the issue at a future select board meeting and let you all continue to contemplate how to consider that proposal for a septic ordinance. Questions about that? Okay, great. Public Works model transition. So just an update. We had a conversation at June 8th meeting and July 13th meeting with the Public Works Administrator. Where we left off, the Select Board acknowledged and agreed that he should move forward with the working four-person promotion process. That process is still open, I think, until next week. And so we're looking for members of the crew that are interested in that to participate in the process so they can be evaluated. And the next step for the Public Works Director was to make a specific recommendation to the Select Board on how to implement the other recommendations and over what timeline. And so he's working on that, and we expect a presentation at the September 14th meeting. So just an update. We thought maybe we'd have something this month, but it's not a rush, and we want to make sure that we get good information for you all. Questions about that? Awesome. So 2027, 2028 NHMA legislative policy process. So there's two things I'd ask the select board to consider doing tonight. First, appoint a delegate for the policy conference. It could be any of you. It could be myself. I'll be there anyway as a member of the New Hampshire Municipal Association board. And also to ask you to consider supporting the policies and principles presented so that the delegate, whomever it may be, knows what actions to take on behalf of the community.
I think
Didn't
three
we
of us
discuss
were
this
not
already?
available on the 11th.
We didn't appoint anybody yet. We knew that some folks weren't available.
Anyone available on the 11th?
September 11th at 9 a.m. It's Friday.
Dana?
I have a Veterans Day that day.
I'm going to be
Understood.
at a rugby game.
Okay, so I would make a motion to appoint our town administrator then.
Second. All in favor?
I'd say aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye.
Thank you, sir.
Of course, the policy and principles are linked in the town administrator report. Select person Capiello participated in the process this year. She was on one of the 3 subcommittees. But are there any questions or concerns about any of those policies or principles that came out of that process?
No.
Is the select board interested in supporting those as presented?
Yes, sir.
A motion as such would be helpful.
Well, go
So moved.
You were at the meetings.
go ahead, Joyce, you're on.
I move that we accept the policies as proposed by the committee of New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Scotia.
Capiello, aye.
Yeah, Mantrek, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye.
Great. So training opportunities included for your benefit. Staff have certainly been participating in a lot of these trainings. And so if you find any interest, let us know. We can get you signed up. And I will turn it over. Yes, please, Mr. Mantra.
We didn't include in this report anyone participating in any of these trainings.
That will be a rollover for the September meeting.
Okay.
That may be something that we pivot to doing quarterly. It's
A lot of work because there's a lot of education taking place.
yeah, it's I think getting the department heads used to providing that kind of on a monthly basis. I think it might be something that's more helpful. That all trickles through to the human resources administrator anyways, to be filed in the personnel files. It may be more sustainable to do that quarterly and just have that come from the sole contact, and then that incentivizes the department heads to make sure that they get that information to the human resources administrator.
I know it's a pain, and I'd love to give you additional work, but I think it might be more appropriate to do it monthly. For one thing, do it quarterly. We'll have a whole select board meeting going through the quarterly training that people have gone through. So, but I think it would be more timely if we do it at least monthly. I don't think we need it for every meeting, but yeah, I think it's useful.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I have to agree with Dannon on that. I have found it immensely helpful to understand what new information each of the employees are gaining by taking the coursework, how many of them are taking each of the coursework so that we have some depth historically. So, yeah, I know it's more work, but I think it's kind of important.
We can do that. So 2 other items that were on the town administrator report that I just need to pull up electronically here. Project development, exemption credit, financial audit, ERC.
You're on my computer, I can pull it up. for
Nope,
you.
I got it right here. I'm just scanning through National Night Out, September ordinance. Okay, air quality study information. So the select board on June 8th discussed 2027 zoning explorations. Part of that discussion was a broad discussion of how do we protect the quality of natural resources in Barrington, as specifically as it relates to zoning gates. And part of that, I think, was part of that initial discussion was driven, I think, by the background conversations happening in other communities relative to data centers and other heavy impact development projects, and how do you write a zoning ordinance that kind of contemplates those in a legal way, but also in a way that protects and preserves resources. So anyways, part of that is air quality. And so I included in the town administrator report and available online some details from Kathleen Simmons, who's the NHDES Senior Air Quality Specialist. And so some of the highlights here, the state currently has 12 air quality sensor stations across the state that they monitor and track. And so that's a regional data set that they use for their own purposes. But they also have a newer program. It's called the Community Air Monitoring Program, CAMP. And it utilizes low-cost fine particulate matter sensors to monitor the air quality on a more discrete basis. And so those exist throughout the community. All of that data is uploaded and used by DES as well. And so a link to those maps and to that publicly available data is available in the town administrator report. And so there's a separate employee at DES who we haven't connected with in as much detail yet, but Mike Little is his name, and he's the air monitoring program manager. But he suggested that there might be grant funding available if the town wanted to undertake its own air quality study that could feed into the same data set. And so there's still some questions on how, I mean, it's good information to have. How can we act on that? They weren't certain that there's ways to regulate it the way we might want to, but they have resources and they're willing to share. So that's an update on the progress there. Any questions on that?
It was exciting to read that report.
Okay.
So they talked about these little mini sensors that you just needed to have Wi-Fi. But I couldn't really figure out the cost of those.
And that's where the grant, that's what the grant might be available to help fund. It was a commercial product. Purple Air is the name of it.
I wonder if they could operate off of using a solar panel, like if we're going to place them, get permission to place them maybe high on a telephone pole. Can you use a solar panel to ensure that I know it needs Wi-Fi, so it would need to be near our municipally owned buildings, but I think it would give us an opportunity with future zoning to say, yes, industry can move here, but it cannot increase the particulates more than 3% in our air if it's a plastic recycling plant. I think it's the one area that at the New Hampshire Municipal Association that they seem to say was our avenue to keeping that air quality clean and working with industry. So I don't know. I'm all for it.
Yeah, so I think especially if there's grant funding available, that's a great idea. I had a different thought on where we might be able to put it. Hear me out. I think it would be really neat if we put it somewhere accessible by the middle school, and science classes could use this as a way to do some environmental monitoring. It could be worked into some sort of curriculum.
That's kind of cool.
And, they could be responsible for.
Kind of cool. Elmo, brilliant there. Yeah. I like it.
So, I mean, I think we're open to continuing to explore what the opportunities are available and maybe use it both as a learning opportunity, but also for baseline data as we go forward.
Awesome. We'll continue to keep you posted.
It'll be fun.
The other topic was political signs in the town center. So we are headed confidently into political sign season. I'll tell you the bad news, the worst news first, I guess. It's going to get worse in 2 years because the folks under the Golden Dome in Concord decided that the state primary needed to be in June, not in September in 2 years. So now we'll have political signs starting in like April. And then in June, it'll be whoever won those primary elections from June until November with the political signs. So
Can we place planted arborvitaes in that area
Yeah.
all the way around?
Right.
And, like begin making it not so, yeah.
it's so anyway, so this topic has been discussed to the nth degree, and I've provided a link in the town administrator report to the frequently asked question that we have available on the town's website with all of the information. Basically, there are two separate sets of rules, one on our town roads, which we regulate in the zoning ordinance, and one on the state routes, which the state regulates. The state's regulations are really wonky. One of the most wonky parts of them is that the state allows by right political signs in any right of way. I shouldn't say with any right of way. There are exceptions. But for Barrington's purposes, the state roads in Barrington are allowed on state routes in Barrington anywhere. But they don't allow any other signs. So like the community market sign that's down in the town center and the women's club is doing, a raffle. None of those signs are ever allowed. But political signs are allowed. And the other kind of weird nuance with the state's rules are the state gives requirements for when they must be removed, but the state doesn't have any requirements for how soon they can be put up. And so that creates this really weird dynamic. The state owns the land in fee, not an easement, not a right of way, owns the land in fee at the northwest corner or the southwest corner of 9 and 125. So where the Bloomers Garden is all the way up to and including that parking lot that the town maintains, which we have a lease for. State owns all of that. So the town cannot regulate it. 2 years ago, this select board was presented with concerns and, we reviewed the fact that our municipal hands are largely tied with how political signs are presented at that intersection. And the select board had the recommendation that maybe we reach out to the political party leaders for our community and ask them to respectfully request that their candidates refrain from placing political signs in front of the garden. Like, let that be the sacred space. Like, let everybody see all the good work that the Bloomers do to the garden. Don't put huge signs in front of the garden. It didn't work then. It obviously isn't working now. We can do that again. We can certainly, that it's cheap to make that kind of request. But there isn't a lot else we can do. We have asked, and I've, briefed the select board on this before, we have asked the state for a pathway to either have a lease or maybe even purchase a portion of that quadrant of the intersection so that we could regulate it. Maybe we could have a welcome to Barrington sign there in conjunction with the garden and other things. And suffice to say, the state is incredibly reluctant to consider a request like that. And so there's not a lot we can do.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing preventing anybody on this board or any member of the public for calling the candidates who have chosen to place signs there and ask that they not block the garden. Perhaps with enough pressure.
Remind me, across the street under the big Barrington sign, what does the state own? How far does the state own into this?
So that isn't that is not, the right of way on that side of the intersection is not as wide. So there's private property that comes down. So the old railroad bed is a parcel, which is private property, as you know. And there's a parcel in between the railroad bed and 125, which comes down to a point at the intersection. And so the state certainly has a right of way. I'm not aware that there's a survey pin where that point is that marks the edge of the railroad bed and the point of that. My understanding is that most folks agree that the EMS flagpole that's down there is on private property. My understanding is also that I'll say most of that big billboard that Caleb's Country Store and Christmas Dove maintain is also on private property. The signs coming closer to Route 9 and closer to 125 are likely in the state right away. The other quadrants are, again, more complicated. Most of the northeast and southeast quadrants of 9 and 125 are probably mostly private property that the state owns, holds an easement over. So like Irving and the old Citizens Bank building, those private property owners very likely have a say whether any political signs are placed on those corners of the intersection because they're an abutting private property owner. The unique difference with the southwest quadrant of the intersection is where that railroad came across. It turns into Route 125 out like in front of where Knights is. Obviously, the building just before MD Motors, is the old depot. That's where the train station was. So all of that land there was public land. And so when the state took that over and reconstructed Route 125, they kept ownership of all of that land. So that quadrant is a very unique ownership scheme, different than the rest of the quadrants, and makes it very complicated for things like a Bloomer's Garden or for things like a Welcome to Barrington sign. They have room for a traffic circle. They don't have any plans to install a traffic circle, but they have room for a traffic
Say that word.
So anyways, the information's available online. Anybody that asks, I'd point them there and maybe sigh to commiserate with, how complicated and frustrating it can be. But that is political signs in the town center. And I have communicated with our municipal office administrator, and she has one signature for the chair to sign.
Okay. Sounds good. Moving on to old business. Okay. No old business. Moving on to new business, 2026 tax deeding.
Very simple. This is, I will admit, this is one of the hardest times of the year for the work that we do. This is August 17th is when any lien from 2023, unpaid 2023 taxes that remains unpaid on August 17th, the tax collector issues a tax deed for. And in some cases, and I've provided a copy of the list as it stands, or as it stood on August 5th, a name has come off that list this morning. But some of these properties are occupied. And, so this starts a process where we take deed to the property and then we start evictions and go through that process. I have to give a lot of credit to our tax collector. She's an incredibly welcoming and compassionate person, and she's been able to work with a lot of folks to get them in, take the stigma out of, unpaid taxes and work with them to figure out maybe they're eligible for an exemption or credit they weren't aware of. Maybe there's other property tax relief they weren't aware of. Maybe they can participate in a payment plan, so they kind of build that into their monthly budget. And so we've been able to work this list down very small. Truth be told, probably more than half the folks on this list right now have been on the list before and come in, the day of or the day before to settle up. So we certainly hope that pattern will continue. But we do expect there will be a couple of properties that will be tax deeded on the 17th. We have one additional deed waiver to discuss, and that we will discuss that in non-public. But other than that, the outstanding balances will be deeded on August 17th for your information. And the state law is clear that is the duty and responsibility of the town to execute on those tax deeds, save for extenuating circumstances which the select board has and will continue to be presented with.
Okay.
Questions about that? Okay.
We're good.
Then we'll move on to select board member reports and concerns, starting with Mr. Sakosha.
MLB moved their meeting, that is coming up, so no updates on that. Parks and Rec, last two concerts are coming up, last week of camp, and then they plan on installing the new pavilions at the Chief Conway Community Park.
Oh, nice.
Cool. And that's what I have for
All
you.
right.
I haven't reported on the Trails and History Committee, but we do have a committee that's looking at 5 different trails. We prioritize some of our existing trails to research the history of those areas, and then to develop signs. So the committee has, most of them have finally got to developing some text to put on. And we do have the contract now with the sign company, Paquette. We were not able to get pictures to them that they can use. Many of us are kind of working from reprints and whatever. We have a meeting on Wednesday. We're actually going to meet at the Historical Society and just go through files and see if we can find some original photos. So anybody who knows that people have original photos, I don't even know if photos were taken of some of these areas, like the poor farmers in the 1800s, the iron bog mining was in the 1700s. I've gone to the Historical Society in Concord, didn't come up with much in terms of photos from any of those eras. But we're working on that, especially some of the mill sites in town on the Barrington Trail. So we'll keep working on that, but we hope we're getting near to at least having a mock-up sign and being able to get pricing and work on design from the company. Planning board is tomorrow night, so I can report on that.
Just to point out, the work that Ms. Cappiello and the Trail History Committee has been undertaking was one of the top recommendations out of the Downtowns and Trails program. You'll remember we brought in a team of consultants from UNH Cooperative Extension that partnered with us to help explore the intersection of community and economic development. And they were blown away at what we have for trail resources and, the work of the Conservation Commission over many generations to establish dozens and dozens of miles of trails. And they said, you got to take that to the next step. You've got to get some.
It didn't fit with the economic part of it for that project.
Right.
You've got to, take it to that next step, get signs out with some shared identity. So people show up and they know that you're on one of your trails, and on those signs have some nod, even if it's just a QR code or a map or something, but have something that lets people know that, hey, you've got a town center, you've got businesses down there, you've got other trails, you've got other things you can do in Barrington. And so it dovetails really nicely with an area of interest for Select Person Cappiello in helping tell some of the stories of these conservation properties. And so a really diverse and awesome group of folks that she was able to pull together to work on this project. And it's the research, it's the field work and the research to pull the information together that takes the most time and effort. And they've been dividing and conquering. And so that relationship with the sign company has proved fruitful, and we'll be able to hopefully integrate that to be able to have the similar fit and finish and stuff. So it's really exciting work that's being done.
Thank you. One more thing about planning board. We're having a primer tomorrow night on impact fees. So I'm looking forward to hearing that discussion. More to come.
Transfer station been active. We had a discussion at our last meeting with Mr. Lapierre, who's from Waste Management. He presented some preliminary things. I think they're planning to offer us a 7-year contract. There'll probably be a 5% increase every year. He pointed out that's not the CPI, but that's based on what their recycling costs are. He's to come back with more detail on that. The other thing is kind of exciting, and we'll have hopefully we'll have a meeting on 22nd or 26th of August, something like that. Madbury's, we're talking about some regional integration. Madbury has a proposal, which is actually on your Outlook account. You may have seen it, but we're going to discuss that with them on the 14th, I think, of August, which will be up. Library, we had a report earlier about them. That's their big concern. They're going to build fences and things, but that's all part and parcel of what they're doing. And as we point out, the ABC will begin its work on the 14th, actually, probably begin before that. But our first meeting to discuss it will be the 14th.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair?
The Capital Improvement Committee.
You're red.
I'm red. Capital Improvement Committee had met, I think over the past 2 meetings, we've created a scoring mechanism for items that will be presented on capital improvement. We heard from the Recreation Department and the police station as far as their future needs, and worked out a way that they can present prioritization of their projects to capital improvement at the same time that capital improvement has heard those presentations, and they're scoring what they as a committee feel are priorities for future growth and for potential spending that will be presented to the taxpayers. We had a meeting with the shared group of the school board and select board to talk about ways that both transparency in the budgeting process could take place, but also about the impact of some state laws that have passed and what that can mean to our school district. My takeaway from that is it means losing teachers. And so combining classrooms to larger classrooms is kind of what our school district could be up against, is what I took away from the meeting.
This is relative to the tap cap question, which will be on the ballot in November.
Yes, and important to consider and look at. And then zoning board had a request for reconsideration of a case. The board found that there was no violation of the execution of how the meeting was held, that all information had already been obtained, and so the reconsideration was denied. That's now sitting, I think, at a higher level at the state for the state to determine if they agree with the zoning board. And a variance was provided for side and front setbacks for a rebuild.
Okay, so for the Conservation Commission, it was a bit of a light month for them. They primarily discussed some upcoming planning board cases and how they can work with and continue to support the development of the Invasive Species Committee and, help in directing that. The bigger thing that I'm going to bend your ears on is I sat through the Freedom Energy presentation at the request of the Energy Committee. And Freedom Energy is billing themselves as sort of an alternative to community power. And it does appear that they're kind of going around making this, what I would describe as a sales pitch for towns and municipalities to leave community power and come to Freedom Energy because they can provide more competitive rates. What Freedom Energy actually does is they broker contracts. They do not buy power. They do not sell power. They are a broker. And the way it works is, and they are a for-profit corporation. They contract with a municipality for a 5-year contract. Their fee is tacked on to the kilowatt hour price that you pay and is built into the contract that they broker for the municipality with a third-party power supplier, a retail power supplier. And so those contracts with the retail power supplier can be anywhere from 6 months long to a couple of years. And it really is comparing apples and oranges. And I have been asked by the Energy Committee to sort of just share these details with the board as this conversation, continues on. What the Energy Committee is trying to decide is whether they're going to make a recommendation for a warrant to leave community power, and whether this is something that they would consider as an alternative. But what really is missing in that conversation is, community power is a much bigger entity when it comes to what they have to offer than Freedom Energy, who is just a for-profit, broker. And that is, one big concern that was raised is we are part of the Poverty Plains project, which has now broken ground, which is the group net metering, which, anticipates that we should be able to participate as a municipality in net metering with power rates once that goes fully online. It's a solar farm. There's some question as to whether we would be able to remain invested in that if we were to leave community power and go anywhere. But, it came up in the context of discussing Freedom Energy. And I asked the representatives from Freedom Energy what, if there are any municipalities they're working with currently who are in the process of not only leaving community power, but joining Freedom Energy and what that process looks like. And they said that Epping and Hudson are actively in the process of leaving community power and moving to Freedom Energy. Bow is in the process of leaving community power, but they're not coming to Freedom Energy. And for the two that they are working with, it has been over a year that they've been trying to figure out how to disentangle that. So it does appear to be a rather complex process to do so. But my overall takeaway from this, was just that we haven't been part of community power that long. I understand that there are concerns, and while the most recent rates have come closer, there is still a difference there, and people still have the option to opt out. I don't know that going right into something else they're actually very new to this aspect of their business. They primarily do brokering for, say, like TurboCam level businesses. So this community aggregation is new. It's only been going on for them for a couple of years. They didn't have a whole lot to show for it. And something like a 6-month contract seems very volatile. So you're not locked in as long, and what that means is whenever the contract is coming up for renewal, a new request for proposals goes out. So while I fully support the Energy Committee in exploring where do we go from here, do we stay in community power, do we not, I'm not sure that just jumping ship from thing to thing whenever the grass is laid out to look greener is necessarily how that wants to be approached. So they may be coming to us at some point for feedback on that. They're still continuing to discuss it. I will say, I think that my thoughts and their thoughts are very similar on the situation. I do have materials that I can share from the meeting if anybody wants to see the presentation and sort of the examples that they were giving. Some of the rates seemed very competitive, but those were a bit older. Some of the more recent rates that they were touting, honestly, were not that very far off from the regular utilities. So if anybody would like that information, just let me know and I'd be happy to forward you their PowerPoint presentation. It was an interesting conversation, but I think that we need to look at those two things separately. What are we doing with community power? There's an advocacy portion of community power that doesn't come, this is just a for-profit company. They're not out there doing the advocacy. They're not actually out there looking for how they can improve power supply to municipalities. They're just looking for another way to make money. So that was my takeaway from that. I don't think that the Energy Committee was ready to jump in with them either, but I'm happy to answer questions if I can. I have a lot of notes.
Can I just ask you to ask the Energy Committee, back when community power came on, two things were appealing at that time: the rates, but also their renewable energy sources. I am of the opinion, and I could be dead wrong, but that community power created this competition that then potentially drove the largest supplier in the state to go from what at the time was about like 22 per kilowatt down to like 14. I'm interested in looking at a side-by-side chart in these past 2 years of where those large suppliers were at. Then we introduced a competitive market, and now where they're at. Because my fear is, should we leave community power and you eliminate the competition, I'm going to go right back to a $400 a month electric bill is what occurs to me. And many other residents might have that same experience. So I think I'm interested in just seeing that side-by-side progression chart over those couple of years.
I can
Yeah,
certainly.
and I feel like I didn't look at the question of reserves, because I think community partners didn't, or community power did not have the reserves it needed.
Right, that they are working to build up.
Yes.
And that is, so I guess the chart could include, here's where we were at for both the biggest supplier and community power at the start, and how much of what we're paying is just going into reserves, and we know that that's going to change over time as they build those reserves. So for me, I would be interested in knowing that.
Yeah, I can tell you that as far as paying into reserves, it's not nearly what they anticipated when they started, because there has been more volatility than they expected. So they weren't able to divert as much into reserves as they had originally wanted to. So it's going to take longer to build up the reserves that they were anticipating. So that I did know the answer to, but I can certainly take that question to them. There is also the outstanding question of there is going to have to be a reckoning with the rates through the public utilities. The Public Utility Commission is going to, try to restrict that so that it's more gradual than just one singular jump. But there is still going to have to be that makeup that is coming through the public utilities for the undercharging that has been happening. So, there is still some more volatility that we know is coming.
It's hard to qualify any of it as undercharging.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. But as far as, legally looking at the situation. So I can definitely take that question to them at the next meeting. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but I will certainly send anybody that wants the PowerPoint presentation from Freedom Energy. I didn't get the impression that we're looking to go, we're more looking at focusing on what are we doing with our current situation rather than where we're going next and whether that is a good fit for Barrington.
And that presentation is recorded. All the Energy Committee meetings are recorded, and it isn't available on the town's website yet. That was just 4 days ago, but it will be available on the town's website if anybody is interested.
All right, going back to, all right, now we are at our second public comment section. So again, it's 3 minutes per person, maximum 15 minutes total. If you are online, you are welcome to use the raise hand feature. If you're in the room, you're welcome to just approach the lectern. Please go ahead and just give us your name and your address and share what you would like to share.
I'm John Bennis, 27 Stillwater Way, Barrington. I am a member of the Invasive Species Committee, so to answer your questions that came up, tomorrow the group has been soliciting comments and reviewing it among members. We're meeting tomorrow to finalize our comments and plan on presenting them at the meeting on the 20th.
That's for the septic ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
As a Trails Committee member,
Next tab.
yes, next hat, please consider, it seems like the town center trails have been a separate initiative from the town trails that we maintain as part of the Trails Committee. So please consider getting in touch with the Trails Committee. Maybe we can benefit each other somehow.
So Charlie is on the history, so he's been
okay,
representing that. So the trails, I don't think I tell them off the top of my head, where we're looking at doing historical signs would be Brazen Hill because of the iron bog mining operation, the Poor Farm Trail, the Barrington Trail because of a mill site, and the Commons because of all the history with the railroad and with baseball there.
Yeah, we're meeting tomorrow, so Charlie can.
Okay.
All right. Now, taking all my hats off and just speaking as a Barrington citizen, I find it deeply disturbing that the town and the state can implement policies that present a financial liability to individuals. And this is specifically related to the milfoil discussion. That there's a lot of talk, well, education. Milfoil's been around a long time. Education's been around a long time. It fails to take into account that some people just don't care. Or some people may care, but they're just in a hurry. Whatever, it's gonna happen, right? There's also a saying that correlation does not mean causation. Right, from the statistical analysis world. So even though we could say there's a correlation that all this boat launch work that's been done, right, recently to Ayers Pond, might not be the causation of the milfoil. But it sure feels like that, right? And if you look at Swings Lake, it's an ongoing battle. Once it gets in and gets through, it doesn't end. Well, the financial support from the state rolls off very quickly. And Swains Lake Association members have had to come up with a lot of personal money. So I'd like all of you, I don't expect a response, but I'd just like you to think, is it right that the town can do things that result in financial liability to its residents? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Select Board, Town Administrator. My name is Jim Higginbottom. I'm President of the Ayers Lake Association. So I waited to talk at the second public public comments because I wanted to hear what the Select Board and the Town Administrator had to say about what's been going on. So I'm going to start because I'm a factual-based guy. I'm going to interject some opinions just because that's a natural course. I'm going to borrow some text from an attorney's letter that is in the files that Connor referenced. It's the attorney for Camp Fireside. And it basically starts in a conclusion that it cannot be the case that the department, the DES, would condone the following sequence of events. The applicant, Town of Barrington, has for some time been using and are promoting its citizens the use of an unpermitted structure. That is a factual statement. The applicant then twice seeks wetlands PBN to repair or replace that shoreline area used as a boat launch. It's never been a boat launch. It's not a boat launch now. It's never been sanctioned. Talk more about that. Twice the department, DES, denies the applications because, among other reasons, the applicant has not established that the boat launch was grandfathered. Applicant changes course and obtains a shoreline PBN with explicit purposes of expanding a roadway by purportedly only doing work outside the wetlands. The wetlands jurisdiction, yet performing the work in such a way as to promote and facilitate use of an unpermitted boat launch. Applicant then advertises access to that boat launch to the public, encourage expanded use of a structure that is likely to have adverse effects on water quality, that has never been permitted, and that the department has been held not to shown, has not been shown to have been grandfathered. So let's start with some of the comments that Connor made, that the DES thinks this is okay. No, they don't. The compliance officer's documentation that we have access to and that has been publicly shared states none of that. In fact, what they did do is issued you a letter of deficiency because you poured crushed stone into a space that you were not permitted to. That stone has not been removed. I have photo evidence of that from today. There's still 6 inches of crushed stone that has not been raked back out into the space that was in the letter of deficiency indicated was illegal and out of scope for the permit. What you may not also know, that when I took that picture today, there was 2 divers in that picture. They were there today removing Eurasian variable milfoil. The chances of that being fully eradicated is not simple. It's not quick. It may never happen because the town refuses to close down what they have designated on their own as a boat launch. Now, I'm sure you're all knowledgeable of the concept of preemption. And that is if the state, as I've read from this letter, has told you twice a boat launch doesn't exist, the town of Barrington has no power whatsoever to designate that that is a boat launch. When the federal government tells the DES, the state, and there's a letter I can supply you if you don't already have it, the USDA NRCS states no boat launch can exist on conserved land or can be designated a boat launch based on flowage rights, which, by the way, belong to the Ayers Lake Association, not the town of Barrington.
Sir, I just wanted to let you know you've gone well past the 3 minutes.
And I think I've said pretty much everything.
Jim can have my time.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I think I've said everything that I would like to say, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
My name is Diane St. Jean. I live on Small Road on Ayers Lake. About a year ago, I think we had this conversation where either I or someone else on the Ayers Lake Association suggested to the select board that it would be a good faith, practical measure to perhaps create a warrant article that would create a capital reserve fund for mitigation of invasive species on Barrington water bodies. I know we talked about that. Nothing happened. Unfortunately, our worst nightmare has come true. And you said that your October 26th meeting was going to be considering which warrant articles the select board will sponsor. I am asking you to sponsor a warrant article creating a capital reserve fund that would mitigate invasive species problems on Barrington water bodies. That may not be the exact wording. I know that you have specialized wording, but the spirit of this is what we asked for, didn't happen, asking again. Also, I would like to just mention that the Ayers Lake Association is a voluntary membership organization. It is open to anybody who cares about water quality of Ayers Lake and the watershed. And we are not anything like an HOA. There is no way we can enforce people to pay a certain amount of dues. It's all voluntary. And as John Bennis said, it just seems patently unfair that because of public access, that private property owners are held accountable for this problem. DES has always told the Ayers Lake Association that they would manage the mitigation for the first year free of charge. After that, it's up to the lake associations or the property owners around the lake. Totally unfair. So please help us now, whereas you didn't help us last year.
Hi, Ron St. Jean, same house as Diane. We went kayaking down in that area where the weeds were this afternoon, about 4 hours ago, and we found some floating plant material. And I used my phone app and identified one of those pieces of floating material as the same stuff that was there a couple of weeks ago before they did the cleanup, which turned out to be the invasive material. So there's still stuff floating around. That's how this weed spreads. It's little fragments that get chewed up from the bottom in boat propellers. And we have wind that goes in every direction on that lake. So those fragments can get dispersed anywhere in the lake. It's going to show up again somewhere else. This is a chronic problem, like so many diseases that just keep popping up once you think you've got them eradicated. It's going to come back, and it's going to cost a lot. And it's, putting our property values in danger. It puts the lake itself in danger of turning into a swamp, which every lake does eventually, but it's a matter of whether it's dozens of years or thousands of years. And milfoil can speed that up a whole bunch. So we really wish you will take that seriously and consider helping to fund mitigation. That's going to be really expensive. And I know people in town aren't going to want to pay that, but they have to know about the economic and environmental impact of not taking care of that. The residents that live by the water just don't have the resources. This isn't Winnipesaukee. We can't fund that all. And there's a whole bunch of other invasives in the area that are becoming a problem too. The spiny water flea, which sounds like a cute little critter, but it's not really very nice. And zebra mussels. And those are very easy to bring in. And if they show up, those are not able to be eradicated. So, we just hope you can do something to counteract what's been done so far. And that's up to you. But please just take that seriously, as we all do. And hopefully we can come up with some solutions. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else online or in the room? Okay, seeing none, I am going to
Oh,
go.
there's one more, I think.
Please. This will be the last.
Members of the board, I met Connor at a meeting previously, and I know Jim's dad. I went to school with, dating myself here, but I'm a resident here in town and live on 129 Pond Hill Road. My wife grew up here in town, and the reason I'm coming up here is to represent Camp Fireside. I'm on the board, and our concern with the whole boat launch situation was for the kids that learn how to swim down there, and they're down there throughout the summer at the camp. And having had boats, I don't know if you guys are boat owners, but I've had a few in my life, and been to a lot of different boat launches. We're talking about this being a boat launch that's, again, never been designated an official boat launch. People from the town will tell you that, for years, people put in canoes, and as kayaks came more prevalent, they're in their small boats. But to have somebody come in there with a big boat, that's a whole different scenario. And you're within 50 feet of kids swimming and learning how to swim, because it's very, very shallow. It's not really a optimum place to put a boat launch to begin with. But Connor spoke about a couple of things, and again, on that being a boat launch, you guys applied for a boat launch. That was turned down, I believe, a couple of times by DES. And so the last and final plan was to reportedly widen the road. But widening the road didn't mean putting a kiosk up that says Ayers Lake Boat Launch, or signs that indicate for out-of-staters to come in and park their truck and trailers to launch their bigger boats, or whatever the situation was. One of the things that bothered me was the application process that went to the state. Affiants were taken from town residents to supposedly support this supposed application for the boat launch. One of which I found out was my father-in-law. He's 92 years old, and when he was asked about it, he was told to sign this affiant he never even read, and has no, he didn't have any idea when it was read to him what was written on the affidavit, any of the stuff that was on there. He's not a boater. He's lived here since 1972, and he's probably been to Ayers Lake 5 times. He has 130 acres that abuts Camp Fireside. He has his own pond. If he goes fishing, he goes there. So that was rather, as a former New Hampshire trooper here in the state, I've done a lot of search warrants, arrest warrants, and filed many affidavits, and the ones that were submitted with the application were worded pretty much similar.
Okay, I do appreciate your input. You've gone well past the
concern
3
again
minutes,
was just
and
for the camp.
we've now hit our max for
Okay.
this public comment
Thank you
session,
for
but
your
we do
time.
appreciate your commentary. Okay. So with that, since we have now reached, I think, more than 15 minutes of public comment, we are going to close public comment and move on to our non-public. So I would accept a motion. Motion for non-public.
Motion to enter into non-public.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Could I revise that motion to enter non-public for purpose of reputation and land?
Yes.
Would you accept
As
that?
amended.
Thank you, sir.
Sakosha, aye.
Capello, aye.
Nantrick, aye?
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye.
Well, let me mute your microphones. Okay, you're live.
Okay, we are returning to public session. We have nothing left on our agenda, so at this time I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Push aye.
Capiello, aye.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Samaco, aye. We are adjourned as of 9:04 p.m.